John, have you started?
Yvette, why don't you, now that we're recording, Yvette, why don't you call the roll?
Of course, good morning and good afternoon to all. Starting roll call with in a non-specific order, Rebecca Aguilar,
Here.
Lauren,
Here.
Yvette,
Here.
forgive me, Jerry.
Here.
Is Baylin in the house today? No. Raphael, I know he was going to not be here with us today, right?
He's in your neck of the woods.
Correct. And Matt.
Here.
Okay. I think we are done. And with that, I pass on over to you and John.
Did you get me, Yvette?
I'm so sorry. I did not. My apologies. Claire
Here.
Regan. Okay.
Great. Thank you very much, Yvette Davila-Richards. And thank you very much. Special shout out to Yvette Walker, whose birthday it is today. Thank you for joining us. And I'd just like to say happy birthday. We won't sing for you.
Happy birthday, Yvette.
Happy
Thank
birthday.
you. I'll sing you that.
Yvette.
Everybody. I can't sing worth crap. Real quick, I'm getting messages from some members. They need the passcode. Just want to let you know to get in.
Right there.
They should have gotten an email from Zoom with that information, and I don't know that I'll be able to share it in time. Do you want to just send me who it is specifically and I can reach out? Or I can give you the passcode and you can respond? I don't know,
Yeah,
whatever.
John emailed the passcode to all of us a minute or two ago too.
Yeah.
So you should have it at the top of your email if you want to just let them know. Andrew Seaman just dropped it in the chat as well. Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes. I sent Jennifer Royer some changes, and I don't know if anyone else saw anything.
I move
Fine.
approval of the minutes.
A
Do I have a
second.
Motion by Lauren, second by Yvette Walker. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Seeing none, that motion carries unanimously. And let's go to public comment. Anything not on the agenda anyone would like to talk about, please just raise a hand or send up a flare in the chat. Seeing none. Going once, going twice, going thrice. Seeing none, why don't we move to the treasurer's report? Good news there. Yvette Davila-Richards, the mic is yours.
Sure. So we met our board. As always, things are looking on the up and up. I know John is gonna speak into also the logistics of it, and then also the sale of the building and that coming along. But I didn't see any discrepancies that I need to alert anyone about. So with that, I'll pass it on to John. And to
Thanks,
Jake.
Yvette.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Jake's on the call as well.
Jake.
And in your folder, you'll find the memo from Jake and I, as well as two reports, our balance sheet and our budget versus actual. And so if you look at those, first quarter is always a very, interesting time because, well, let me do this. Let me let Jake he's here. He made the time to be here. Let me let Jake give a few words about the report and then I can fill in anything. So go ahead, Jake.
Okay, thank you and welcome all. So the first quarter was a very good quarter for SPJ, and as my memo states, the memo we sent out, it's one of the best quarters that we do have, and it helps carry us through the quarters where we don't have as much revenue coming in. So we have key revenue streams, and that's our membership, which comes in ratably over the year. And then we have the award ceremonies, which happen in January, February, March. Convention is in the September quarter. So that's kind of where the major revenue streams flow in. And so our first quarter is generally a good one, helps us carry us through the summer months when we don't have as many items coming in other than membership. But what is unusual in this particular quarter is that we applied for and received a grant that the government issued to us through the SBA, the Small Business Association. And it's to help through all the coronavirus things, and it's to help keep, it's called Payroll Protection Program, and PPP is, if you've heard it, and it's to help small businesses like ours keep people on the payroll during trying times when our revenues may be down. So we actually received $195,000 in from our application, and we can use that to pay for salaries, utilities, benefits. Mostly those are the main ones. And in the report, there's not 195,000 in there, there's 123,000, and that's how much we are able to basically utilize of those funds. So it was a great boon to this organization, and I thank John for leading us and trying to get helping us get that loan. So first quarter revenue was up, expenses were down, and so we're looking really good. And again, the expenses were down because we didn't have as much travel. So again, the coronavirus situation is kind of helping us out a little bit in that regard, which it does a lot of organizations that have high travel budgets like ours. Everything seemed to be going well. Like I said, our membership dues was higher than a little bit higher than what we had budgeted, and that's always a good sign. We did receive in one sponsorship for their convention that we have already, and again, like I said, a lot of the expenses were down and because of the travel, but also just due to timing differences of when we paid things. So it was a good quarter, and we're continuing to try to do good things. And I just want to know if anybody has any questions regarding the financials.
Any board questions first, and then we can go to members of the public?
I see Lauren's hand.
I just wanted to commend John and Jake for good work on our finances and a very clear memo explaining all the details of our financial situation. So thank you both very much.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Any other board members? Before we go to the public, I'd like to reiterate that we've had a couple tough years at SPJ, and John and Jake especially, and others at HQ have done a great job of, along with the members, of helping to right the ship. 400 members since September is a part of that. But you know, tightening the belt in a tough year is a bigger part. Bailey.
Hi, I just wanted to say I'm here. I'm sorry I missed attendance and that I was late.
All good. Thank you, Bailey.
Okay.
Rebecca,
Oh.
and then Yvette.
I just want to second what everybody has just said. John and Jake, thank you for keeping us strong, keeping us organized, keeping us informed. And, you know, we're ready for the coming months. Thank you.
Yvette.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with that. Jake and John made everything really easy for me and the committee when we had to look over all these financials line by line. So I really appreciate that, because not all the time are all financial information easy to digest. So I really appreciate all the details that went into this and giving us a very good report that we can happily say, you know, expenses are down and we're doing well. So thank you to all. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other board hands, Dan.
Hey, how y'all doing? I just had a quick question about the PPP loan. Is there anything that we have to do to not pay it back? Like, do we qualify for that potentially? And if so, what?
Yes, so there's a process. You have to apply for forgiveness. And to do that, each bank is different, but our bank is like, so we basically have to fill out forms, and we have to let the bank know, who then communicates it to the SBA, that yes, we did spend it on the authorized things that we're supposed to be spending it on. So we provide, basically it's our payroll records, it's salary and benefits basically is how we're covering this. But so we have to provide them with reports from our payroll records that in our 941s, our tax returns for payroll, basically to prove to them that we've spent the money we can write off the utility bills as well. And so we have to provide them with proof of the utility bills that we paid. So it's kind of a lengthy process, but it doesn't take them very long to process it. And I'm sure we're past that point right now of expending all those funds. So it's actually one of the things on our to-do list for this new quarter that we're going to enter into in a couple of days here. And so we'll go through it. It's a standard process. I've gone through it 3 times now with other entities. And as long as you're spending the money on what the intended purpose was, we're good. So we are. So I have no doubt that we're going to get it all released and not have to pay it back. So.
Thanks. What are the plans for the other 72,000?
It's basically the reason there's a difference between 72,000 and the 195 is that the first quarter, I just reported on the expenditures for the first quarter. So the expenditures that have already occurred basically have already wiped out that 72,000. So we're basically down to 0 for the loan, and all we have to do is do the application process.
Thanks very much. Very nicely done.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question, Dan, and the work,
Sure.
Jake, and the federal government for the handout.
Oh my gosh.
Any
Just
other
think how many
questions?
companies are doing that for?
Any other questions? Seeing none, why don't we thank and excuse Jake. Enjoy your Saturday. Or I should leave that to John. I don't know if you have other needs for Jake.
I'll leave it to Jake if he wants to stick around. Or not.
It's gonna be a fun meeting, Jake. Stick
My
around.
daughter.
Thanks, Jake.
All right. Well, thank you all.
And with that, let's move over to a discussion on, I'm excited about some new communities. We've had great success with some of our communities, and we're looking to expand the roster with several new ones. And with that, I'll kick it over to John, who's been doing a lot of the legwork on this.
Thanks, Matt. So if you remember, the board approved a set of annual goals for 2021. And one of those goals was the establishment of 3 new communities for SPJ. So that leads us to our conversation today. And we did a couple of things leading up to the conversation. One is we huddled together a group of those who have been actively engaged with those communities currently that we have at SPJ that have been successful, and even those that were tried and didn't necessarily make it. Just so we could learn and tap into the knowledge there to see what makes a community successful in SPJ. In addition to that, Matt and I had many conversations around the sort of the debrief of that conversation, and then thinking through, where's some energy we can really apply this goal towards. And then one last thing that we really should consider is, can these communities help us further our strategic plan? And that's a very important thing because we have a lot of entities working towards the fulfillment of our strategic plan, including staff, our committees, you as a board. If we have communities that are also harmonious with our strategic plan, then it lifts the pressure off of staff, committees, and board to carry out some of the very essential elements of that. All said and done, then we want to propose to you 3 communities that we think we can really seed and grow through the remainder of 2021 into maybe a really full-fledged 2022 sort of effort. Who knows how quickly they may germinate, if I'm still using that analogy. But those 3 communities would be, first, Campus Life. And these names may change. One of the things that I think the communities need to figure out is how they want to be identified. But so Campus Life would be one, and that would be focused towards students, faculty, staff, those who are directly connected to the collegiate experience regarding journalism, and even our membership, our chapters and on campuses, so on and so forth. So that would be one. The second one would be a free press community, and that would try to coalesce a lot of the energy in our organization, which there is a ton, and anybody on the board would know, around the issues of the First Amendment and free press. And that happens in different pockets of conversation throughout our organization. So maybe this is a way to take those points of light and give it a nice big shining beam focus, so that we can really make some headway on advocacy efforts and things that are related to free press and First Amendment issues. So that would tie directly to our strategic plan goal of being fighters for the First Amendment. And then the third one would be a new tech community. In our strategic plan are many call outs to trying to stay on the cutting edge of where technology is going in journalism. And we don't currently, I would say and assess, have structures in place to help us do that very well. But a great structure would be those who are already out there in the industry, who love new gadgets, love new tech, love the new, digital tools that are out there. What if we gave them a chance to connect with each other, share with each other those things, and then at the same time, it provides a benefit to SPJ in that it flags some of those new technologies to us. So we think if we establish those 3 new communities, that would really help us further our goals. I would also add that, this wouldn't be the end. We would continue to add new communities as we develop them. So if there's a 4th or a 5th one on your list that you think is really cool, we'll get to it. I would say probably at some point and in the near future. And then the last thing I'll say before I turn over to Matt or any questions is, one of the things we got to remember about the dynamics of these communities is that they are largely self-sufficient, largely organically fostered, developed, and grown. And so we have to be comfortable sort of with an entrepreneurial spirit that we may seed these, and some may really take off and some may not. And that's okay, because that's what the nature of these things are. And so others may pop up on their own. Some may emerge and be successful. I really think these three can, but it'll really be up to the community to develop that inertia to keep itself growing and fostering engagement. So that accompanying the memo that I put into the folder is how I'd like to kick off this conversation.
Yeah, thanks, John. And I just had a couple more high level points before I go to board discussion, and hope that we can get a proposal to create these 3 new communities. Obviously, there's a lot of directions we could go in communities. We have some super successful ones. There's some people on this call from the freelance community and from the international community, both of which are tremendous forums where like-minded people can get together and get excited about what they do, look for help, tips, job networking opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. We've had some communities that have not been successful, such as the Gen J or young journalism community. There's a very small community journalism community, and there's a digital community that really never kind of got off the ground. So with that in mind, 2 thoughts. As you all know, my priorities this year have been campus life and diversity and inclusion. The campus life community speaks for itself. John and I have had multiple conversations with the new Student Trustee Council, who helped kind of shape this thought and this path. And I think they would be very instrumental in helping make sure that community is vibrant and successful. There are a few communities that we did not choose. We chose the proposal is as such because we have right now a robust new technology forum, Journalist Toolbox, seeded by Mike Riley 20 years ago, shows that program can be successful. People want that. Obviously, the success of O&A shows that a tech community would be successful. And obviously, a free press community speaks for itself. That is what drives so many of us in this business and in this room today. There were a few other ideas for communities at this early stage that we put on in the on deck circle. Some smaller ones on podcasting and mobile journalism. The idea, I think, at least my thought is, we want to create larger communities at the beginning to give them a greater chance of success. And because it's one of my goals, I was also excited to see a DEI idea for a community. The reason why we're not moving forward on that, at least personally, at my proposal, is because the diversity committee is so strong and successful right now. We don't want to duplicate the efforts of that. They're already doing amazing stuff. If we didn't have a strong diversity committee, then maybe there would be a need for that. But at least as I see it, there's no need to reinvent the wheel there. And so with that, I'll kick it over to board discussions. I see Rebecca's hand and then Lawrence.
Matt, first of all, thank you so much for acknowledging the work of the diversity committee. We may not be blatantly out there, but we're definitely addressing many of the issues that come to the table and come in front of you as our president. And I appreciate that you let us address them and you are involved in them when we bring them to your attention. So thank you so much for that. While I appreciate this endeavor to look into different communities, I think that right now it is a very, how can I put it? It's a struggle. with our chapters. And I think that while we should open up more communities, because I am a member of the freelance community. And in fact, Dan Axelrod, who ran the digital committee, he's on here. And, what I think with these communities, I think it's a great idea. But what I'm concerned is that we're going to put effort in growing communities while our chapters, some of them are hanging on by a thread. And so while I feel that communities are so important for the cohesiveness of our organization, I also feel that, and you, Matt, have been very productive in making sure we plant the seeds for more chapters. I just want to make sure that those seeds and the crops we already have basically are still growing. And I'm concerned that we would put a lot of effort in establishing new communities, and possibly, as John said, some won't catch on. Now, one of the things that I also wanted to bring up is that we have great committees. And I wonder, for example, campus life. While I think that is a great idea in bringing students and professors and all those in the academic world together, I think our journalism education committee has done outstanding work, and I can see them in the next, as we continue having our vision in that area, doing a lot of things that can reach out and address the students and the professors who are in need. And so sometimes I wonder, will it be duplication work? Freedom of the Press Committee, love it. But again, we have a great legal defense fund, which also educates us about what's going on with freedom of the press and the challenges it faces. We have an FOI committee, an outstanding committee that addresses many of the issues that concern the freedom of information, which often goes back to freedom of the press, and our ethics committee, addressing issues that concern ethics, which I feel fall under the umbrella of the Free Press Committee. And again, what I want to, I think, as together as an organization is not duplicate duties and efforts and goals, but only enhance. And sometimes I wonder if that will affect those committees, because I know, as speaking to many, and I'm going to be in conversations with the current chairs of those committees, many of them have many goals and visions into growing and making our organization stronger via the committees. As for the new tech, well, I'm glad Dan Axelrod had shown up, because in 2010, he pulled me into the digital committee. Now, it was a committee back then, and Dan will probably second me on this. It was a struggle. It was a struggle to get people engaged. We produced a PDF on new technology. We were doing things that were amazing. And so growing that community, or growing even the committee and engaging. And again, Dan Axelrod was the head guy at the time when he pulled me in to add diversity to the committee. Thank you very much, Dan. And so that's what my concerns are right now. Focusing, I think communities, again, are very good for the cohesiveness, for the growth of our organization. But at the same time, I don't want to redirect energy, especially from headquarters, into other areas while some of our chapters are struggling to even have members run for office. So that's my point of view at this moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca. Lauren, and then Claire.
Thanks, Matt. I just want to start out by saying I am very supportive of communities and growing communities and adding 3 new communities. I've been around this organization a long time. Many people in this meeting know that. I've been here since the community started. And one of the things that we have seen with communities is they're as good as the core handful of member diehard people committed to that issue are. Gen J actually started out as a strong committee because there was a handful of people who were very interested in it. And when those people were gone, the community, Gen J fizzled. And so one of the questions I have for you, John, looking at these 3 is, have you identified, or are you going to look to identify 3 to 6 people who are committed to these ideas and leading and growing these communities?
Yeah, that would be the quick next step, that once we identify what topic areas we really want to focus on, it would be to identify who would be the core leaders to help us, get this off the ground. And then so there would be it would be people, It would also be technology. So we are trying to develop an ability for these communities to interact with each other and through a technological platform. Right now we have a Discord server we use during SPJ 20 that we think would be a really good opportunity for that our student trustees really want to start using as well. So if we have the right people, we have some technology, and we have good things for them to talk about and to have discussions around, I think we can get them moving.
That's great. And I think one of the things that had been missing in the past was headquarter support for communities. And again, I think communities are really important. You can be interested in a community and be an active member of a chapter, but it also gives people who don't geographically live near a chapter, or for whatever reason aren't interested in being a member of their local chapter, but are interested in one of the core objectives of our strategy, and it's a way to get more people involved. I have a specific question about one of the proposed communities, and that's the Free Press community, because we have the FOI committee. How do they intersect? How do they know who's in which swim lane? How would they collaborate? How would that work?
So I'll answer that too, and Matt, unless Matt, you have a response to that, but
I have some thoughts, but you can go first, sure.
well, I was just going to add that for me, communities are unique from committees in that in most organizations like ours, committees are extensions of the board's work. So committees are giving tasks and directives by which they are to implement and do it ends up being a list of goals or priorities or tasks that they are there to achieve. And in some situations, that's those are more spelled out than in others, but that's their extension of the board's work. These communities are more a chance for members to have a place together to fulfill passions, right? So if I'm passionate about the Free Press and First Amendment issues, I want a group of people I can talk about when I see a news thing come through, send an article out to them and be like, what are your thoughts on this? I want to debate it with somebody, or I want to talk about it with somebody, things like that. That's what communities really exist to do. They're an extension for the members to engage with each other. So that's how I see the difference. Now, there might be some overlap, and each may lean on the other to have some, shared and common interests. But the FOI committee, and I can't spell it out in direct like now because I don't have it in front of me, but should have a clear list of objectives by which they are to achieve. Whereas communities, it's up to them. That's sort of how most organizations are structured.
Yeah, and I guess I'd say something similar, which is it's kind of the difference between an organic and a grassroots forum that bubbles up from the bottom versus something that is more focused and goal driven. I think of it like as a Slack channel, and you can zip in on any given day and talk to people of like mind, whereas the committees meet on a regular basis. Or sorry, a landscaper just decided to start rearing the engine just now. And committees meet on a quarterly basis or a regular basis and tackle certain things, whereas with the freelance and the international communities, they're kind of mini membership groups, people of like mind and like thought that can talk about and do kind of whatever the group collective wants. And so I think Hillary and Hazel will tell you the freelance committee does that, very focused, but not in a committee structure. It's a group. And so I do think that committees and communities are really different. I remember when the community, like you, when the communities first started, I wasn't quite sure what they would look like or how they would work. And I think we've seen and can say with great certainty that the community model, when it works tremendously. And even when it doesn't work, it works sporadically. Like you said, the Gen J committee started off really strong. Dan can tell you that the digital community started off strong. So there are, I think there are differences, pretty big differences between the two. That's what I'd say.
So John, I guess the question I would ask is that there be communication, because for example, the international community does a lot of panels and programs, and they might be focused on an issue that the FOI committee is also talking about. So just to make sure that there is open communication between the two. And just one last thought from one of the RCs, the potential of adding recent graduates to the campus life community. So just wanted to throw that out there for your consideration, that they might help, they might be a good resource to bridge the gap between campus life and being a pro member.
Yeah, great thought. And we've had that discussion. Okay, I see several board hands up, and apologies, I'm not sure who was up first. I think, was it, I'm going to say Claire, and then Yvette DeVilla Richards, and then Bailing, and then Yvette Walker. And I hope I got that order right. Apologies if not.
Thanks, Matt. So I have one point or suggestion and then one question. So in the campus life community concept, I teach at a college, and I just know that administrators are they don't have the same goals as faculty members when it comes to student publications and journalism programs. And so I think it's important to have a target group or a target audience and not one size fits all to these communities if we're going to proceed with them. So, because those groups come with different goals and often don't agree on things on campuses about publications and press. So that was just my point about a target audience or a target group. To be clear about it, I think that's more successful. And then my question, I'm just doing some fact gathering, sort of just to add context for me and maybe for some others. What are the obligations to the society for these communities? Are there obligations? Do the community members have to be SPJ members? I'm not clear on that. And also, is there some kind of governance in place? And are we working on that, or does it exist and I just don't know about it? So those are my questions. Thank you.
We actually have that next on our agenda. There's going to be a bylaw change where communities get more structure.
So I guess I would suggest, yeah, that's in place before expanding the number of communities, I guess. One would come before the other, I would suggest.
It's a fair
And
point.
does that include the context question about their obligations to the society? I mean, I guess,
Yes, it does. Yeah.
because it could be a membership growth opportunity, so I guess I'll wait for that discussion, but I just wanted to put that out there, that I think that should come first. Thank you.
Yeah, that's in your agenda, that community members
Thank
should
you.
be SPJ members as well. Yvette DeVilla Richards.
Hi, so to echo on that, the communities sound great. I think it's also a good idea, but to echo on what was said earlier, I'm just a little concerned as to how we have some chapters that are not doing so well. So are we not gonna then look out to see if those chapters grow? Are these communities going to communicate with the chapters? Is totally separate? A few questions here. Who, if any, will monitor the communities? Who can get on these communities? Like Claire mentioned, would it be SPJ members or just those looking to become members? And how can it be seen that the chapters and then the communities don't overlap in what they're doing? Because we would want the success of it, of course. But I would just want it to be seen that then they're not overlapping and that we're supporting our chapters, because there are some chapters that are very active, like the New England chapter also has a lot of events, just like the international community does as well. So I just want to make sure that then we bring up all these communities, but those chapters that are starting to fail, we're not giving them a hand so that they succeed, because we're focusing more on the community. So those were all the questions that I had. I mean, I'm happy that we're wanting these communities so that, those passions that some members may have can be executed, but I'm also concerned about the chapters that have members that also have passions and just don't know how to go about making that be a success.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Yvette. You raised some great points. And I think after the board asks its questions, when we get to public comment, people like Hazel and Hillary can explain a little bit about the history of the communities and how they fit into the kind of SPJ paradigm. I will say, just to answer your specific questions, they're open to anyone. Anyone can join a community. As you'll see, as you know from your reading your board packet, the next item puts some specificity to that. It requires you to be an SPJ member. It requires the communities to have officers. So those leaders would be the ones then that kind of essentially are the mods. Right now, the moderators wear those hats, but I think less formally. And then to your third question about the overlap, you got to keep in mind, as I try to do every day, that 40% of our members are not in chapters. So that's quite a few, 2 out of 5 that aren't in a chapter that also, could use this. Communities are separate and distinct from the chapters. They would require a little bit of help from HQ, but in my view, there's enough bandwidth to help to get this off the ground. And once that happens, these communities are really kind of operate on their own devices, and as you'll hear soon, very successfully. With that, Bei Ling and then Yvette Walker, and then we'll go to the public if no other board members raise a hand.
Hi, thank you. So first, I want to agree with the concerns that Rebecca and Yvette and some others have expressed about communities potentially weakening the chapters. And second, I would really strongly agree with Claire that it seems like this should be hammered out with the bylaws before the proposal of any actual new communities is entertained, right? So related to that, I'm wondering if, as for the bylaws committee or whoever works this out, should the communities be separate from the organizational governance structure? In other words, can communities just be affiliations of people who share similar interests, where you keep the governance and the delegates and the voting and the membership, quote unquote, to the chapters? I think that might address some of the concern about community members taking away from chapters. And if they don't want to join a chapter, that they can join as an unaffiliated person, but then be part of a community. To Claire's other point about how sometimes different members of a campus have different goals. I mean, I think that might be true operationally, but with respect to collegiate journalism and support for a free press, I would hope everyone is all on the same page. So maybe a campus community that is inclusive of different kinds of people would be a place for those differences to be hashed out. But then Claire also made me think about, how do we decide who gets to be a part of a community, right? Is it just anybody who wants to join can join? So that's another question for the bylaws group. And then my last question, and this was not in the bylaws edits that I saw, I'm wondering how communities get disbanded. If there is, just like we create on-ramps for chapters, is there an off-ramp for communities after they've been established? Thanks.
John, do you want to answer any of those?
Well, so I think it would be important that we try our best as possible to keep these. I like what you said, Bei Ling, about being more affiliates or loosely defined, so that, because that's where the energy seems to come from when it comes to, these are similar passions, these are similar interests. And so, that's something where the off ramp, for instance, may be that the group just sort of loses its, energy and just eventually stops, meeting and discussing, and okay, then we go to where the energy is next. You sort of follow the flow of where the members want these things to go. And so, and just to address sort of generally, I think I look at this as an all boats rise kind of thing, that the best thing we could do for chapters is bring more members into SPJ. And this is a way to bring more members into SPJ. Some people would join SPJ just to be a part of the international community because of the cool things they're doing. And so now they're in SPJ, now the chapter gets a chance to recruit them into their activities. So I see this as a win for chapters.
Yeah, and those great questions, Bei Ling. I would just say that the Gen J community is the most recent one to kind of atrophy, I guess I'd say. And there it was just, there wasn't interest. And so, there were a handful of people kind of at the end of the party in the room, and then they just realized it was time to continue on metaphor, to call it a night. And partly that was because of the branding of Generation J. No one knew what it was. And partly that was because it seemed weird to silo young journalists when they really should be part of the collective rather than off on their own. So thank you for those questions. Next, Yvette Walker.
Hi, thank you. I think that one thing that we should at least take a look at if we go forward with this is connecting those communities to the relevant committees. And we mentioned, and I understand Rebecca's concern. For example, this is different, I know, but for example, when Beiling and Jerry were working on a task force about student chapters, they were very good about keeping in touch with the education committee. I could see that if we create communities like this, we need to have a real strong connection between the communities and the committees for a couple of reasons. Just to know what each other's doing, we can feed off each other, and perhaps there are people in the communities that may at some point want to rise to a committee level, and getting more involved in the SPJ is always a good thing and always a way to keep people engaged. So, if we go forward, I'd really like to see we take a look at those committees and see those communities and see which committee it would make sense for there to be a very clear connection to. I think that would be something that would help that success.
Great point. Lauren, you had your hand up first. I want to go to Jerry and then back to you. Jerry.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. So I've been listening and kind of just gathering information about what everyone has said. I am a little concerned about the comment where Matt, I think it was you, I'm not sure, that you said a lot of our members are not members of chapters. Is that correct? Did I understand that?
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, first of all, I like the idea of communities. I just want to go and put that out there. I'm just wondering, is this an opportunity to maybe draw members into chapters and forming chapters? And I realize, some people are not geographically close to each other, but now that we live in this all Zoom, all Teams virtual world, maybe this is an opportunity to create virtual chapters where people are in the same state, but maybe like when I lived in Colorado, for example, if you didn't live in Denver, you just didn't exist. And so, now that we live in this virtual world, we can draw people in and just say, call it the Colorado chapter or whatever. And then the second thing I want to mention is the Gen J journalists. I belong to another group, and our young journalists are super active, and they're hungry for information, especially from some of us who've been in the game for quite a while. And I'm just wondering, could we restart that, maybe put some more gas in the tank? Because as we all know, this last year has been super hard for all of us. And I just feel like, especially younger journalists who are just coming out and just trying to get their feet wet, this might be an opportunity for them to commune and learn from one another. So I don't think we should call it, we should pull the plug on that just yet. I just feel like maybe we identify some really strong younger members, give them the directive of, hey, let's restart this and let it go, because maybe rebrand it to something else. But I just feel like we shouldn't abandon that group. And thank you. That concludes my comments.
Yeah, great points, Jerry. And the 40% is largely for geographic reasons. I mean, there's no way to know for sure. We haven't pulled all, whatever that is, 2,400 of them. But it's people in large states that aren't near the big cities that have chapters. I will say that the fundamental thought behind a community is that Zoom makes things different, and we'll see how the end, quote unquote, hopeful end of the pandemic, as we reemerge from it, changes things, whether we continue to Zoom or meet in person. But the thought with communities, right, is that they are designed to feed into people's interests rather than where they live, because those are really two kind of separate paths. But great point about the young journalists. Lauren, you had your hand up again.
Yeah, sort of a long list of things. I guess maybe having been around so long, it has pluses and minuses, but I just wanted to address a few things. In terms of chapter support and helping fledgling chapters or chapters that are struggling, I know John has made a strong commitment to that. And we also have our regional coordinators to assist with that. And chapters are geographic, and we have 12 people by region who were there to assist. So if anybody here is struggling or knows of a chapter that's struggling, please reach out to John and Caroline. Please reach out to your regional coordinator. We're here to help, and we want to help you succeed. Secondly, I mentioned in chat that there are other organizations that have very strong chapter, and they don't call them communities, but a community equivalence. And you know that my current paycheck comes as doing PR, and I'm a member of PRSA. I'm a member of the Los Angeles chapter, and I'm a member of the higher ed group, which is their version of a community. And they serve two totally different purposes, and one is not at the expense of the other, I think is the point that I wanted to make. Virtual chapters is an idea that has been around for many years, I think since Erwin Gratz was president. And it was actually something that I strongly advocated for and never really got off the ground. But because we are now in a much more virtual world than the past, that might be something that people are might be interested in, might be worth getting a pulse of the membership about. And remember, we have different ways we can get pulses of the membership that are not just having HQ put out a survey. Again, we have 12 regional coordinators who have lists from Impexium for every member of their region, and they can reach out and they can get feedback. And I think that we should be doing more to get input from our members on what they think as well. And I should have made notes because I forgot the last thing that I wanted to cover. Oh, I'm part of the 41%, that's it. And there was a committee first chaired by Paul Fletcher and then Alex Tarquinio, and it was the purposes of finding governance for the unaffiliated. But in the context of that, there was a survey as to why people weren't affiliated, and geography was just one of several reasons. So there's a lot more to it than just where you live. So I think that communities give another option. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is I'm actually a little bit puzzled that we're having this conversation right now about expanding communities, because it's in a strategic plan that this board endorsed unanimously. And there had been many conversations when the strategic plan was created. So I just don't quite understand that, but if we need to continue to discuss it, then so be it.
Thank you, Lauren. And thank you, Yvette Walker, for taking your hand down. I was just going to ask you if you had a question or not. And I will say, just before I go to public comment, although Rebecca, did you have a hand up? Okay.
No, do you want to go first?
You can.
Addressing what Lauren just said about the discussion of this, I think it's always good as journalists to be discussing any issue all the time as it evolves. You know, we live as journalists 24/7, and things evolve, things change, opinions change, the feedback changes. I have a question, because I remember when I started looking into the freelance committee, which I'm a member of that, and the SPJ Fort Worth chapter, that I was told that the community had bylaws. So my question is, who does the community answer to? I remember, I think, yeah, it was Hillary who told me that they had bylaws, and Hazel was looking for them. Do they have, again, separate bylaws? Who decides those? I see they have their own little board, is there an election process to those committees? Because I'm learning as someone who will take over in 2 months, trying to figure out the dynamics of this, So again, who do they answer to? Who decides, again, they have a board. Do they have an election process to be able to make sure we have, diversity, equity, and inclusion in that? And the bylaws, where are those bylaws that I was told about? Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Great question. And I am going to hand the mic over to the public speakers. And as it comes to your turn, if you're in those committee, I see Hazel with a hand up. You're second on my list, Hazel. So if you could answer Rebecca's question, that's a good one about the formulation and.
And real
of-
quick, can I jump in real quick because Hazel will be addressing us. I also want to know, we keep saying about these gatherings. Where are the gatherings? Because right now, as part of the freelance community, I see that they have a Facebook page. So does that mean all these other communities will be having Facebook page? And also, who oversees those for good social media practices? Because again, somebody could say, F the president, and then suddenly somebody who writes about SPJ goes, oh, they said F the president on this community. Who oversees those for good social media practices? I know the community, a freelance community, has their Facebook page and the very active conversations there. It has been brought to my attention that they have some 300 members. How many of those 300 members are actually SPJ members? I heard John say that, the communities bring in members. Where is the facts to that statement? If they're bringing in members, how many in, let's say, the past 12 months? I think those are questions because it's, again, I am for communities because I'm part of the freelance community. And I see how, especially Hazel every Friday says, hey, show us your work. It is a positive, happy feeling. Somebody's asking me to show me their work. But at the same time, there's all these other questions: bylaws, a board, who do they answer to, social media pages, where's the social media policy on that? And if they're bringing in members, where are the numbers to match that statement? Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I will drop the order of public comment in the chat so you all know. Hazel and Hillary, you're 2 and 3. So I know I've talked to Hillary this year about the social media for the community, and maybe she can address that, and Hazel can address your questions, Rebecca, about bylaws and structure. I will say before I kick the mic over to Bob Becker to go first, the communities are a big part of it. As I was going to say, as Lauren said, that these are in our strategic plan. The last board and this board agreed that they are a priority. So whether we create any today, I would hope that we continue to prioritize them going forward. And with that, Bob, why don't you start, and I'll drop the names into the chat just so everyone knows. It's Bob, Hazel, Hillary, Andrew, Dan, and Jonathan. And then I see Israel just raised his hand too. So that's the order. Bob.
Okay, let me start off by giving you one reassurance. The bylaws proposals would make chapters and communities essentially the same in how they're created, how they're governed, and how they are interrelated with SPJ. Rebecca, can I just, I probably will answer some of your questions.
No,
I have been thinking.
I'm sorry, Bob. I was just wondering what you're saying right now. And again, I'm not, I apologize for imposing on your public statements, but I just figured that since you're going to discuss the bylaws next, that maybe you could save that, but that's the only reason.
Yeah, I will. I was just saying that in passing to start answering some of the questions that have been raised. The Bylaws Committee, for a variety of reasons, has started talking about communities perhaps 10 or more years ago. So this is not a new idea here. But all of the questions you've raised are valid questions. They are questions that have been coming up all along the way. In terms of why communities are important and why they're necessary or important, even though there are chapters, think about a couple of things. Think about Region 1, which is the most populous region in the country for SPJ members. It has 9 states. It has 5 really functioning chapters, and I don't know whether Keystone is running or not. But one chapter, the New England chapter, serves 5 states. Okay, it serves Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. 3 of the chapters, PCLI, the Deadline Club, and New Jersey, are less than 50 miles apart. And you have a region that's almost 1,000 miles east to west and something like 700 miles north to south. Okay, that's people in outside the few areas where there are chapters are not inclined to join chapters because they don't get to go to the meetings. They don't get to go to the bar with everybody. They don't get to meet the people. So that's been one of the big issues. That's one of the reasons we have 41% of members who aren't affiliated with chapters. And the communities, because people join them because they're interested in the subject matter, that's what drives their interest in the communities. That said, when you think about members, will they renew their memberships? Well, if I live in Buffalo and I can't really participate in the stuff at the Deadline Club, why do I renew my membership? Well, if I'm a member of a community that's putting on programs every week, because I cover cops and there's a community that deals with cops, then I've got a reason to keep paying my dues and being involved in SPJ. So the communities serve that purpose. So they keep people in the organization. They provide a benefit where we have a convention, we have regional conferences, and a few other things a year that SPJ does in the way of programming for its members. The communities are doing it on a daily or weekly or monthly basis. So that's one of the reasons. So the other thing is the virtual chapters thing has come up several times, and it's been roundly, a lot of people don't want to be part of that. They don't want to do it. As for governance, the communities, the two communities that are functioning very well right now, international and freelance, are as big as as the largest chapters in SPJ. And they should have a say in how this organization runs. And just saying that, well, those people will be represented by regional delegates doesn't really give them anything. I am a regional delegate in Region 2. I have had very little, I reach out to the members who are not affiliated before the convention, but there isn't really much contact and not much interaction. So there are a lot of reasons that people that will join communities. In fact, you'll find from, I think from Hazel and Hillary, that a large percentage of the freelance community members are also chapter members. So they are being, they want to be part of the community. And we can talk later about how that works in terms of delegates and voting and stuff like that. So those were my main points. I have one request, that we clearly say that that if we're going to do the First Amendment community, that it include FOI and government transparency generally. And also to say, you can say you want to start communities, but you can't start them today. Okay, they are driven by the people who are involved in them. There needs to be a nucleus of people to do that, and it takes probably 8 or 10. Just like it takes as much work to run a community as to run a chapter. So you need a body of people who want to do it before you can get it out there. That's what I have to say for now.
Thank you, Bob. Hazel.
Are you muted?
Not anymore. It's hard to mute me, as those of you who know me know. Just a few things, Rebecca. I want to just rush ahead and answer your question about the bylaws of the freelance community, but let me just tell you what the ground rules were when all the communities formed, or when the 5 communities formed, and it was set in I don't remember if it was a policy or what, but there should be something somewhere that says how all of those questions you asked can be answered. But essentially, when the freelance committee, the former freelance committee, which pushed to become a community, a virtual chapter of SPJ freelancers or people interested in freelancing, when we decided that we wanted to become a community, we wrote bylaws and we submitted them to headquarters. And we went to the board and asked on the basis of those bylaws whether we could then be chartered as a community, or I don't know if chartered is the right word, but be approved as an SPJ community. And the vote was yes, and we became a community. The bylaws, which Rebecca unfortunately have disappeared through the years through a few headquarters staff transitions. There were a couple of really messy transitions, and an awful lot of documentation disappeared. And the same has happened with the freelance community to some extent, only that there was somebody along the way who didn't pass along all the paperwork. And so the freelance community charter is gone, bylaws are gone too, unfortunately. But I will tell you what they said. They said that there would be an annual election, and headquarters staff has always run the election for us, and we have cooperated with headquarters staff on making that happen, and it did not happen in 2020. I think largely because of the pandemic and all kinds of other havoc that was going on. Everybody was just out trying to serve people who were hurting because of the pandemic. And so the freelance community leadership did not change from 2020 to 2021. And Hillary can talk a little bit more about that. She's the leader. I'm really just here to give you the background and the history. We chose at the time not to ask to charge dues, to answer Yvette Walker's question. Wait a minute, which Yvette? Did I get the wrong one? Sorry. But it was always understood that we could ask to charge dues. The freelance community charter said that to be a member of the community, you had to be a member of SPJ. I don't believe that the charter or bylaws for the international community said that. So I think it's possible that there are people who believe they are members of the SPJ international community who are not members of SPJ, but I don't know. And I don't believe either Dan or El is here, or Bob Buckman, I think, are the three ringleaders of that group. So that's a little bit of the history. And I've been in touch recently with Michael Fitzgerald, who was the first chair of the freelance community. And last time I asked him if he still had a copy of the bylaws, the answer was he didn't think he did anymore. And Anna Pratt was the next chair of the freelance community, and she moved, and I think her documents were lost. And and headquarters no longer had them. So sadly, that's the way it goes. I'm sorry that we can't give you what you're asking for.
Thank you, Hazel. Hillary, you're next. And just a reminder, as I said in the chat, if you could keep your comments brief, and as the conversation proceeds and someone has made the point, if you want to quickly emphasize it again, please do, but no need to go into great detail if the question's been asked and answered. Hillary.
Thank you. And I just want to say I welcome this conversation because, as Hazel said, when I took over as the chair of the freelance community a few years ago, looking for the bylaws was the first thing I did because I wanted a roadmap and it wasn't there. And so I think this is like, I really welcome the conversations about communities and about their accountability. We have been like gradually working to formalize our processes and generate documentation within the, there's like an SPJ freelance community Gmail account. And I've been trying to generate all of our documentation within that rather than within individuals' personal Gmail accounts as we share things and, you know, work on documents collaboratively, because for the same reason, like, you know, in order to avoid the same pitfalls of people falling off of the radar and then any documentation falling away, you know, as they do. And so I do just want to endorse the idea of clarifying, like, you know, the bylaws changes in advance before creating new communities, because the leadership of the new communities like will really be set up more for success if they have a clear set of expectations that they're, you know, that is being held for them to achieve. So I wanted to mention that and echo that it needs to be a team effort for sure. I do also just want to address the conversation about communities and chapters and how they relate to each other. And I just, I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I don't have any way of saying how many of the freelance community members are also chapter members. I know that I am, and I know that the leadership of the New England chapter, like the Northeast chapter, often will get in touch with me because they know that I'm a freelancer, and when they want to do freelance programming, they'll get in touch with me to ask for advice. And I think that in that way, the communities can actually be an asset for chapters, including for chapters that are struggling, because we can generate, help generate ideas and offer a sounding board for specific topical types of programming that those chapters might like to offer. And we can also tap into the community membership that may or may not be chapter members, but may be within sort of like a reasonable proximity of the chapter, who can become a resource on that topic for that chapter. And then, as John said, that might actually get them more involved in the chapter as well. So I just want to say that, like, I think that the communities and chapters can really be playing for the same team, which is to serve the membership. And I would love for chapters to look to communities as a resource in that way. And to that end, I think that, like, as the communities are formalized, and perhaps as more communities are created, hopefully some like channels for conversation between the chapters and communities will emerge, like structural channels for communication to assist and facilitate all of that. So those were the general points that I wanted to make, but let me just check my, one other note is that, yes, unfortunately, partly due to unfortunately, we did not have elections again last year, which we normally do every year. And that is, I think, partly due to pandemic chaos. I know that for me personally, I just will own this, that I was experiencing some personal chaos and had very limited bandwidth for pushing that over the finish line. And then another complication was that with the transfer of the Impexium database, we've been really unsure about who actually is a member of the freelance community. And it's been, the data we feel has not been reliable, and we're excited to have the new database because we feel like we can get it to become more reliable about who is a member of the freelance community and then who should be voting in the elections. And we really want to have elections. I think that we really need, I don't want the board to become insular. And I want us to be pushing the elections, and we've been working on opening up the board meetings and announcing them and trying to invite people in more for the same reason. Like, we just want to increase engagement, partly for the sake of engagement, and also because we really want to draw like fresh energy and new people into the board. and make sure that people understand that it's a board that they can get involved in, and we want some fresh people on the board. So I wanted to mention that, and I partly because the data has been unreliable and it's been so confusing how to actually join the community. We don't currently have the membership data that you were asking about, Rebecca, that I agree would be really great to have. But that's excellent to identify a goal as a goal, and it's one that I share. So thank you.
Thanks, Hillary. And great point about the synergy of chapters and communities. For those who haven't seen it in the chat, Hazel points out that upwards of 200 people of the 315 members of the freelance community are chapter members.
Okay.
And Hillary, a quick follow-up question for you to Rebecca's original question about social media. Could you briefly talk about your approach to that? Thanks.
Yes, thank you. And actually, that's why you're supposed to consult the notes that you write, because that was the last bullet point on my note that I wanted to answer. So when I took over as the chair, well, to clarify for people who don't know, the freelance community early on created a Facebook group, which was, it's a closed group. And I'm not sure at what point the screening questions got added, but a few years ago, we revised the screening questions to just make sure that we were keeping a closer eye on who the members of that Facebook group are. We do not require SPJ membership in order to join the Facebook group, but we do want to vet the applicants to the people who request group membership to make sure that they have legitimate interests and true interests in freelance journalism. So we revised the screening questions to do a better job of that. And we also, as the board, the elected board, we created like what sort of the rules of engagement are on Facebook. And those are in a pinned post at the top of the Facebook group. And whenever there is like an issue, if one of the board members feels that there is a potentially problematic post or comment, or if another one of the members reports that there is a post or a comment that they think is problematic, the first thing that we do is go to whatever the published rules of engagement are and try to see like, okay, well, does this follow the guidelines? And those have proven to be very helpful as guidelines. I think that we've revised them once since they were initially published, just because we, sort of like came upon an issue that we realized that made us realize there was something that maybe hadn't been completely addressed. Ultimately, like I'm actually not that active on the Facebook group. I don't go into Facebook that often, but the board members generally, like if there's a problem, they'll sort of flag it, raise it up the flag to me, and I'm like, and I'll put out any fires. And we have some established protocols to just make sure that people, if we choose to delete a post or delete a comment that we feel does not abide by the community guidelines, we will inform the person whose post is deleted. And I will also make a separate post to say like, hey, everybody, I had to delete a post because it violated this particular guideline. And as a reminder, here are the guidelines and please keep it civil, so on and so forth. I've also in the past just gotten on the phone with somebody and said like, hey, we keep running into some issues. Like we really want you to be a part of the community, but what's going on? Because lots of people are having a hard time, with the comments and with your posts. And I just got on the phone and talked to her about it as a human being and as a colleague. So that's kind of how we handle it. And if I definitely feel, for the record, like I definitely feel like in answer to, I'm not sure if it was Rebecca's or somebody else's question, I feel like the freelance community answers to the board. And when we encounter issues that we feel like are maybe above our head, or we're in, like potentially gonna veer into deep water, I try to reach out to Matt or whomever the president is at the time, and reach out to HQ to say, like, here's this issue, this is how we're thinking of dealing with it, is this okay? I don't want us to, I like the fact that the freelance community and the other communities have become more and more integrated, because for a while we kind of had a lot of autonomy, and that was easy in some ways, but hard in others. So just for the record, I feel that we answer to, the national organization as it should be.
Thanks, Hillary. And thanks for keeping it real and keeping it civil in that social media space. So important in our day jobs and through SPJ.
Right.
Andrew, you're next.
Hi, everyone. It's good to see you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Andrew Seaman. I'm running for president-elect, so that's one of the reasons I wanted to be here. But second of all, I think, like everyone else who's spoken so far, I love the ideas of communities. I like the bylaws change. But based on the memo I'm reading, I agree with Rebecca for two main reasons. The first is it does not sound like the vast majority of communities are set up for success. This does not sound like something where it's like you build it and they will come. It sounds like we've built it a few times and they haven't come. So I think there needs to be more structure, and I think that's something that can be done without a bylaws change. The bylaws change is great, but it seems like there could be administrative things that HQ could do outside of that to create a basic structure. And, part of what I do on a day-to-day basis is worry about engagement. I work in a tech company, and I think it's great to say, hey, there is overlap between freelance and chapters, but I think it's another thing to say, listen, we need to actually create that that ecosystem, so that way one flows to the other flows outward, and it's almost like a funnel, and you want them to keep going deeper into the SPJ funnel. And I don't think that's there. I think you have these things floating in the ether. And I worry that right now it's too many things too soon because that structure's there. The second concern I would have is I don't think these topics will set these communities up for success. The campus life community, you're going to have a conference with CMA, ACP in 1 year. There's also the Society of Collegiate Journalists. There's the Journalism Education Association. There's AEJMC. So my question would be, what will this community offer these people that those organizations don't already? They're already very robust. The second thing is the free press community and the new technology community. I feel they're really general, and that might be something that happened with the digital community. Show me a journalist right now that isn't successful or that doesn't care about those things on a day-to-day basis who aren't successful. It's sort of like D&I initiatives. This is not something that should be siloed. This should be something that's front and center and integrated into everything that we do. My suggestion would be is to look at the freelance community and the international communities, and what they have that the other ones don't is that nugget of cohesion that's so important. You have a freelancer who's like, this is their livelihood, the international community who have very substantial issues to talk about. The free press stuff, like we talk about, I think the target audience is journalists covering government. That's kind of everyone. Like I do that and I work at a tech company. And like there's a lot of these things. So I just don't think those nuggets are there where you're going to get people who have that cohesive thing. One thing I think communities could be used for, and you can increase membership, is, there's been a lot of discussion in the tech community where there is a growing amount of journalists who work there. We want to be able to talk about, learn how to negotiate and interact with project managers or engineers or something like that, because we exist in these spaces where people come from all these different backgrounds and different professions and are trying to accomplish something. I see that as a really good community. People who are maybe in their communities and want to learn more about journalism. So where can they go to find information about that? Things like that. So my suggestion, if I may, would be to reconsider the communities that we're creating and look for things that have those nuggets. And before you do that, put that structure into place so you have people, you have the system where the chapters benefit from the communities chapter from the benefits. Most of all, members benefit because you need to give them value. And I think you can do that. You can say, hey, you're a chapter member, look at this community. And that leads them down into the SPJ funnel. And it creates a really active community nationally. So just, I wanted to add that because I didn't think I heard that yet. But I think, as it stands now, I think Rebecca's right on this.
Thank you, Andrew. Dan.
Hey, first I want to acknowledge and appreciate all the shout outs. I'm really proud to have recruited Rebecca back in 2009. I really strongly endorse what Bei Ling and Rebecca and Andrew had to say. I can remember being a college professor and being on campus with Andrew when he was 19 and throwing SPJ events through his very active chapter in Northeast Pennsylvania. Laura and I took a PR job in New York City about 4 months ago. So I'm there with you. Recently, I stopped being a reporter after 9 years full time, and I've been a college professor for 11 years. And Hazel, I freelance. So I guess I have to join your community. I think that anything that increases participation is a good thing. I think that that goal shouldn't be lost in being territorial or provincial. I think that if that means creating more communities, then so be it. At the same time, chapters have real value. I got into SPJ because of an upstate New York college chapter in 1999. It led me to run contests to eventually run the Keystone Pro chapter, which, by the way, Bob is still active and throws a very vibrant contest every year. It led me to run for an SPJ board seat in 2016, to run the now defunct Digital Media Committee, to do the SPJ Indianapolis training for leaders. I never would have done any of that without chapters. Beyond that, I would just say in terms of solutions, a few different solutions. One, you have vibrant communities without having them have officers and voting powers. They can be, continue to be forums and social spaces. Two, some form of middle ground. You change the word community to chapter. That's it, bang. And then the community members pay dues. If they're already part of a chapter, then they don't have to pay dues, and they also have to remain in their chapter that they're part of. And SPJ National continues its years-long struggle because coordinators in different areas, regional coordinators, to differing extents have different bandwidth to keep those chapters propped up. But SPJ continues its national efforts and its many strategic plans to keep chapters strong with specific things, whether that means perhaps SPJ National gives a coordinator money to help run an event in a geography where there isn't a ton of participation and it's disparate. So a few different potential solutions there. Keep communities vibrant, social spaces and forums without endowing them with all this power. A middle ground where you simply change the word community to chapter. And again, underscoring that national really does need to keep the chapter strong.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for your service to SPJ and journalism over the years. And I hope you're a PR person who thinks of journalism.
This is a placeholder.
Go to the dark side too much.
This is a placeholder PR job until I can get a journalism professor full-time job. But I love having been on both sides of it. And Matt, I appreciate your work over the years too. And Andrew, I put in a LinkedIn post the other day. Andrew works at LinkedIn. How amazing it's been to see your growth. And I think a lot of that was through the contacts that you made through SPJ chapters and your participation over the years.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
Jonathan, you're next, and then Israel. John Schertzer, did you have something you wanted to address at this juncture, or?
I can just be in line with others.
Jonathan.
Yeah, super quick. This has been a, very much an SPJ discussion, so animated and good points and civil. Just from a DC perspective, being on that board for about half a dozen years, we never noticed any negative effect of any of the communities. The one thing I kind of wanted to add, just from observing and attending some of the international events, is, it's obviously very vibrant. They also have their own email list. And I think just of what I've heard of the freelance community, which has only been good things, and what I've seen and observed of the international community, is one reason these two happen to work is that they are totally grassroots, very loosely structured, all that sort of stuff. That's been the secret sauce so far with, again, just the few that have really had staying power. So yeah, thanks. That's all.
Thank you. Israel.
Hi, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Israel Balderas. Starting July 1st, I will be the assistant professor of journalism at Elon University in North Carolina. So I want to address the board on two issues that I'm very involved with SPJ. You know, I love SPJ. I'm very proud of SPJ so much that I donate. I go above and beyond my dues because I believe in the mission of SPJ, and that's what I try to tell my students. I tell them why they should join because of the great work that SPJ is doing. I think of FOIA, which I'm a member of, and what we do and how active. Hasten has done a great job of leading this year, the FOIA committee, because we do things, right? We are actively out there in the community, not just only awarding people their due awards, but actually trying to think strategically about how we're going to defend the First Amendment. How are we going to write op-ed pieces to support legislation? How we are strategically working with other organizations to strengthen not only the mission and the why of SPJ, but also as the general purpose of journalism in America. So when I think of SPJ, I think of the name brand that we have. And I think we need to do everything we can to, number one, yes, strategically grow, but also protect that name brand. And my concern is that, you know, as someone who's been down in Florida, for example, and I've been a member of the Region 3 down here with Michael Koretsky, the reason this chapter gets accolades year in and year out is because it does a lot. It offers scholarship, it offers help, it's active in the community. And what I would like is to really hone in on why we want to have these communities. The bylaws say that we can have communities, but the board has to approve these communities. And I think one reason why that is because people should come to the board and should at least tell us why they want to start a community. The idea that communities are going to start at HQ and not at the grassroots level concerns me greatly, because what should happen, in my opinion, is that people should make presentations to the board. They should show why they want to exist, how many members are going to exist, and what's going to be their why, not just their what. So the burden should be on the members at the grassroots level to come up. Otherwise, I'm concerned that, you know, for example, the new chapter that I'm going to move into, Region 2, you could dilute the membership. I'm also concerned that I don't want us to work in silos, that it's just our membership. I appreciate that Matt has strategically thought about who else can we partner with? Who else can we strengthen our mission with other organizations? And so, for example, the partnership we're going to do with the colleges, that's a great example that we can strategically think of partnerships rather than communities so we can get things done. And then finally, next year, I think journalism is under attack in America from different groups, from different sides. And if we're going to think strategically about how to strengthen SPJ, we need to focus on how are we going to defend our members in issues of legal rights, in newsrooms, in labor rights, in diversity in newsrooms. And for me, I would urge the board that rather than spend time thinking about communities, we strengthen the chapters for those reasons. Because I think the strength of SPJ, it's as
What just happened?
Thank you, Israel.
I think
some
his
good-
last comment dropped off.
Israel, are you there? You may have cut off, Israel.
Yeah,
Send
his
up a,
last statement.
send up a
Can you hear
flare.
me?
We can hear you
Oh,
now.
sorry. No, I maybe I got cut off, but I was closing out by saying that the strength of SPJ is that it does things. It's very active, protecting its members, and I would just hate to create community.
You're cutting out again, Israel, but I think we got the gist of your point, and I appreciate you making it. I see Jerry has a hand up, and then John. Why don't I go to John first? I'm to move things along here and to get to what may be an equally complex conversation about the bylaws changes of all the communities. I'm going to table this proposal on the new communities. I think we've got some really great feedback and had some really good discussion about priorities, bandwidth, and timing, all of which I take to heart. and I think it was unanimous from board and public. So John, I see Andy actually has a hand up. Andy, why don't you go first, and then John and Jerry? With that in mind, that we're going to table this proposal.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Can you hear me?
I can, yep.
Okay. I think it's a very interesting discussion. I also will just say that I'm a little surprised that it didn't happen when this first was proposed. This was one of the elements of the strategic plan. I sat in on some of those meetings and I only heard nothing but support for them. So it's fine to bring up questions at any time. It seems like the concept even is being questioned, and that's what I'm a little curious about. I think one way to look at this is not how can we create certain set items, but how can we succeed? And if you don't like the idea of, well, let's create communities just to create communities, reframe that discussion and say, how can we replicate what the international community and the freelance community are doing? Because they're fantastic. And I'll put them above just about every chapter in the country as far as bringing people in and getting them connected. So I don't want to think the idea that we have to stick to the chapter structure because that's the only way that people, should be getting together is really a smart thing. Definitely study what they're doing and replicate that. But there are struggling chapters that have nothing to do with whether people are being siphoned off to communities. That's not the case. And I can tell you that as a chapter leader, and I can tell you that as an RD. The chapters are geographic spots where people gather, and there are some places that are just not meant to exist that way. There's not enough support for them. So, happy to talk to you, Cyril, about where you're going, what the situation is like there. It has nothing to do with whether there's a freelance community, about whether a chapter is going to succeed in North Carolina. It's an entirely different issue. But I do agree with the idea that there should be support. So if you're talking about, we want to create communities, which is what this board agreed to months ago, we do want to do this, and now you have a proposal. So maybe you can question the ideas that are attached to the communities, that's fine. I do like the idea that there should be support first. So you set out to create communities, you now have ideas, but you do need people to work with them. And that's how the chapter structure exists. Chapters get together because there's support first, not because there's going to be a chapter in set cities. And let's hope people, join them. So that's all.
Thank you, Andy. John.
Yeah, I'll just keep it really short. If we're going to table this, which I think is fine, this isn't something that can be discussed further, is that I think the long range goal, maybe I should have said this up front, that would help is, I think if we identify a few new communities we want to establish and then work in parallel along the way in refining and developing some of those structural components to help those communities succeed, to me, that's a really effective way by which we can ensure those two things are happening and happening effectively. I don't think it's necessarily right to go ahead and create the structure and then go. We could do it at the same time because we can learn as we go. This is sort of a lower risk opportunity, I think, for the organization, in that if we find the right people who are passionate around these things and sell them on the idea that you're going to help us build this, and we're going to learn from those communities who've already been successful, it's sort of an exciting endeavor to be a part of something that's growing and building from the ground up. So, but I'll leave it at that and know that we'll be chatting more about this in the future.
Thank you, John. Jerry.
I'll keep my comments brief too, but this seems very like the Wild West to me. It's a lot of confusion because I'm reading the comments from Bob and Hazel, which, they seem to have a lot of institutional knowledge about this organization, which is great. But I'm also concerned that, we're not getting other perspectives. Like earlier, Bob said that, people didn't want virtual chapters. Well, that was the world we lived in pre-pandemic. Now we're in a virtual world, so I feel like we should try. You don't know unless you try. I'm a little concerned that, people seem to have more information than others, and it's just very confusing to me as a board member trying to absorb this information and make sense of it, when it just seems like several people seem to have an iron grip on information and other people don't. And I'm just trying to figure all of this out. So I just wanted to go on record saying that and, keep things moving.
What, just to stay on that point, what information do you want?
Well, for example, the communities, like I'm seeing like, oh, they have they have paperwork. No, they don't. And it's just, like I said, it's just all very confusing because I'm listening, but I'm also reading the information in the chat. And it's just, I don't know what to believe. So it's just all very confusing to me. So I can't make a clear decision unless I know the information that I'm getting is factual and correct. And I'm hearing contradictory things. So maybe it's just me, but I'm very confused. And it just seems like this is just very Wild West. And there needs to be some organization. And I think, is it Andrew? I think his proposals make sense to me. Like, let's get it organized and then do it. Because it just seems like we're just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. So, and again, this is probably all moot because we're tabling this. And then in the interest of time, I know we need to move on, but I just wanted to go on record saying that.
Thanks, Jerry. Lauren.
And I'll be brief too. And I know we're tabling this, but in the interest of moving the ball forward, and just reiterating something I said earlier that I heard many other people say, that communities that work are grassroots. It's not, if you build it, you hope they will come. So I would like to propose that John and I come up with a list of questions that the RCs can then take back to their membership. Now that we have Impexium, they can all get a list of all of their members and email them. And let's hear from our members and see where they would get active. Because it goes back to, you get that core group of 6 or 10 people who are interested in something, then that fits within our goals set forth in our strategic plan. Then we could come back to the meeting in September with more specific suggestions and people who are interested. Because when I threw the question out to them, 1 or 2 of them said, do you want names of people now? Here's A, B, C, and D. So that is a group of people that have not been engaged very much since their position rotated off the board. And I think that is to the detriment of the broader group when they can help.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. I don't think you need a board motion for that. I think you can go ahead and do that, and we can revisit this in the future. I will say that, as you heard today, communities are important. They're a great way to draw members in, and hopefully we will revisit this issue and look to expand them smartly in time to come. But with that, and given how much
Matt,
time
can
we
I
have-
please say something, please? I'll make
Sure.
it brief.
If you can keep it brief, we got a lot to go through, and we're losing
I know,
people
but
in 2
Matt,
hours.
this is a very important issue pertaining to a membership, and in 2 months I take over, so you'll be able to say bye, and I'm going to have to deal with it. So I hope you respect my thoughts in that area. First of all, I think Lauren's suggestion is good, but I think expand it. Let's go straight to the chapter presidents and their boards and see what they think. Not leave it only in the hands of the regional coordinators, but send it out because we have good communication with the chapters. With what Andy said about the freelance community, it is one of the best communities. But I will say this, I don't believe that, we have great chapters out there, from Los Angeles to DC, from Minnesota to Texas. And I think that to say that the freelance community is better than that, I think it's not fair. I also think that what concerns me here is, after hearing that there's paperwork lost and we don't know if there's bylaws, whatever, we need to tighten things up with the freelance community. I think the international community does well, but with the unanswered questions with the freelance community, let's tighten that up before we start planting more seeds of communities. And let's go back to the virtual chapters. Let's have a hybrid chapter. I mean, just because I'm in Dallas, Texas, or Fort Worth chapter, doesn't mean somebody in Abilene can't be part of our chapter. They do it hybrid. We're doing a hybrid convention. We can do a hybrid chapter. This way we pull in the people out in the outskirts of Texas, that they're not close to a chapter, but they can still join us because they're part of North Texas or South Texas. And I'm sure the chapters would love that. Another way to engage them. The beauty about Zoom is that it brings us together. And now we can have hybrid chapters as we have opened up the hybrid conference. Thank you for listening to me. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rebecca. And Lauren, do you have your hand up? Or no? Okay. With that, why don't we table this and move to a similar conversation about the bylaw changes, which involves the communities and a couple other changes. John, do you want to tee it up and then kick it to the chair of the bylaws committee?
I
Or
have
should we
no
just go right
teeing
to
up
Bob?
on this one. I think Bob.
Bob, why don't you take it away?
launch
And
it.
again, to the extent that you can be brief in your summary and that we can get to the questions that people may have, that would be great. Take it away, Bob.
Okay. To Jerry's point, I think these proposed changes, particularly regarding the communities, was an effort to make it not the Wild West. It is to institutionalize communities to the point that they are created and they exist and they die the same way chapters do. Okay? So in other words, when the first communities were created, Tara Puckey was running that for headquarters. She made them apply the same way chapters did. So they filled out the application. They had to have 20 members. They were supposed to, I thought they were supposed to have bylaws, but apparently some international may not have. But the point is, the process was very similar, but the board never had any say because this was an informal operation. When somebody comes to you and says, we have 20 members want to start a chapter, they file an application and the board votes on that. The same thing would happen with communities if you amend the bylaws for this. Bylaws would require that chapters have their own bylaws. When Kevin Smith was president, he asked the bylaws committee to draft model chapter bylaws that are on the website, that are available to any chapter that wants to either create new ones or update their old ones. I have a version of that that is modified to suit communities. And so there is a standard framework, at least, for them to start creating a structure for themselves. It would require that members of communities, just as members of chapters, have to be national members. It would require that they have a president, a president-elect or vice president, a secretary treasurer or a secretary treasurer, that they report in the same way to headquarters, that their books be open to the board and to members of at least of their chapter. So in a sense, what we're trying to do was normalize the communities so that they behave the same way chapters do. Okay, with all the same requirements. I don't think it's unreasonable to have a structure that requires them to have a small board and officers, because it takes 6 or 8 people for a successful chapter or a successful community to function on a regular basis. So it's not a lot to ask. And so basically it would address many of the questions that were asked here today if you adopt these amendments. And to go to the point about how they die, well, when a chapter dies, and you have had chapters die or become sort of, just disappear for a while, you would have to vote on what to do about them. Okay, you could take their charters away, just as you can take a chapter of charters away. There's a way to dispose of any funds that they have, just as you have a way to dispose of chapter funds if the chapter dies. So that was our goal, was to create a normalized system and structure for the communities that is the same, to the best we can, with chapters. The only real difference is we don't want to have 2 communities that are so close in subject matter that they interfere with each other. So the board gets to say, if somebody comes, let's say we have a First Amendment community, and somebody comes along and wants to do something that's very close to that, let's say it's the FOIA, a Sunshine FOIA community, we'd say, no, you go be with them because that's too close. We can't support 2 things like that. So that's the only real difference we've put in these bylaws amendments between chapters and communities. Rebecca, you had a question.
Oh, go ahead. Continue, Bob.
Okay. So that was our main goal with regard to the communities. As for governance, it's the same. We have a system under which there are people in SPJ who are members of more than one chapter. Okay. Some of it because they're members of a chapter where they used to live and they still want to keep in touch with that group, and they're members of the chapter where they now live, or they moved from, let's say, Houston, where they worked for the newspaper, to the Washington Bureau, and they're members of DC Pro as well. So, and there's a way, they have a home chapter, okay? And they're counted only in their home chapter for the purposes of the delegate count. And they can choose which chapter if they want to, or they can use the defaults that are in the bylaws. I never liked the regional delegate thing because we had 41% of people, and in most regions, we don't have regional delegates. Lauren has been one in her region. I have been one in my region. I think there were only 3 regional delegates at the last convention, okay, for all 12 regions. So that system was nice to have, and it says maybe we have some level of governance for all of these unaffiliated people, but it really doesn't work. If people are in communities, then we can provide them the same level of representation that we provide chapters. So those are the main things. Do you want to talk about, you want to finish this discussion of the communities part?
No,
Or do you
if
want to
could
go
just
on?
Briefly, I think there's 3 other bylaw changes, just briefly nutshell those for us so we talk about the universe. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. One is, there are a couple of things that you all and Andy Schatz asked for regarding the fellows, and we have done that. It was really simple. It simply no longer no longer says that SPJ will pay the dues for 1 year because you all have adopted a policy that said you're going to make fellows life members. So there's no need for that. And we've also removed the provision that would have limited the number of fellows to 3 a year. I told you the reservations that my committee had about those, but that's your decision. So that's one. There were others that related that actually started 2 years ago, based on the fact that at the last minute, Michael Koretsky jumped into the race for reasons that had nothing to do with him wanting to be president-elect, and didn't want to serve if he was elected. So we discovered that we had a problem filling the position of president-elect if he had won and then backed out. We would have had an empty position for a year, and we don't want to have that empty position because now the board is too small. It would have put a lot of a workload on the rest of you. So we're trying to fix that. Let me just see, there was one other one that
The campaign window.
Excuse me?
The campaign window.
Yeah, the election task force has recommended, and the policy says that candidates have to be nominated 6 weeks before the election starts. Currently, the bylaws say 5 days. I think that 5 days has been way too short from experience, and I wholeheartedly agree with the 6 weeks. And I think that's a reasonable time. It requires people basically by mid-July, under our current schedule, to say that they want to run, so that there's time for the membership to get to know them. If somebody jumps into the race at the last minute,
join the meeting.
There is no way for anybody to really realistically campaign. So that's the only other major one. It is very simple. It just changes the number of days. There were no other bylaws changes that were needed to implement the policy on elections. And those are the main points.
Thank you, Bob. Just to set the table again, there's really 4 bylaw changes in front of us. The choice for us is to, and this is not ultimately our decision, it's the delegates' decision. So the choice for us today is to send them along to the convention for the delegate vote without a recommendation, or to send them out with a recommendation.
I think.
Go ahead.
Yep. Yeah, I think boards generally have just sent them along. I don't think there's any problem with the board saying we favor these things, or we favor these ones and not that one, or whatever. But you can send, I'll be very honest with you, you could decide to send some of them and not others. You could, in other words, you could make a motion that breaks this into pieces. Or you can send it as a block. You can recommend, you can oppose. That's your prerogative.
Right.
But the point is, for any of this to be considered at the convention, the members have to get it 60 days before the opening business meeting.
Right. Which means that we would, any action we take today, John will get that note out to the membership on Monday.
Right.
And so again, just to set it up, there are 4 bylaw changes. One would change the campaign window to notify that everyone that you're running as a candidate from 5 days to 6 weeks ahead of convention. One would eliminate language about fellows related to the number that we can appoint in a year and some dues, because now we give them lifelong membership with that distinction. One would change, do as Bob said, to account for what happens when a president-elect can't serve. One important point that he did not raise that I think will be on the minds of most when they see it is that it changes the title of president-elect to vice president. And then of course the community change, which would require that community members be SPJ members and go through the steps that he said. And so before I go, I thought Lauren had her hand up first and then Rebecca. I just want to say, I have a couple questions. And it gets to this, the crux of the last discussion we just had was on the communities and whether they're successful because they're structured or because they're loosely structured, right? So it seems to me that one of the issues, and Bob, you and I have talked about this first, is how do we know how many members there are in these communities so that for every 50 there can be a delegate vote, when, as we just heard, we don't really have our arms around that. Is that a concern, not knowing the membership? Is that something that can be easily resolved? Is question 1 for you, Bob. And then 2 is to Jonathan's point, I mean, he used the phrase, secret sauce is that we're loosely structured. Do we risk ruining the secret sauce if we impose structure on the communities, or is that exactly what they need? And that, I'm curious what you say on that, Bob, but I'm also, that's a question for the board maybe to discuss and for the delegates to have to decide in September.
Okay, to answer your first question, at the beginning of the process of drafting these amendments, we met, the bylaws committee met with the chairs of the 3 active communities. And the biggest problem they had is figuring out who their members were. And that's because headquarters isn't required and doesn't have to, for any purpose, keep track of community members. It does have to keep track of chapter members. It, in fact, collects dues for the chapters when people renew their memberships. And so if we do this, the community membership would be a question on the renewal application, which you want to be a member of a community, just as do you want to be a member of a chapter. And SPJ headquarters would keep track in the same way of the community membership that they do of chapter members, because it's important, it's necessary. And so this is one of the things that the communities have been deprived of because they're just an informal thing right now. And so by making this a structure, making this part of the institution, it becomes something that headquarters will do. I don't think it requires any greater effort on behalf of headquarters than it does to keep track of chapter membership. It's the same thing. It's a question, a checkbox on the renewal form or the application form. So I think that's an important point, is you got to be a member of the chapter of national, pay dues. If you want to be a member of a community, you just say it at your renewal. This is where I am. Okay. Just one side note on that one is chapters have social media too, and I suspect that some chapters have people who are not chapter members who they allow into their social media, and that's a recruiting tool. So the Facebook pages that the communities have and the Twitter feeds are recruiting tools that they use. And so they may have a much larger universe than the number of SPJ members, but the people who are members of that Facebook group are only members of the community. Under these amendments would only be members of the community if they are also SPJ members.
Thanks for that.
So that's that's the first point. As for the need for structure, chapters are the same. Chapters behave in the very same way. In order for a chapter to function, it has to have a certain nucleus of people to do the work, whether it's planning programs or advocating in their local community or doing training or whatever. So I don't think it's a big ask to the communities to say, we want to have this structure for you too, because it ensures if you can't get 10 people together to do the work, then the community is going to fail. If a chapter can't get those 10 people to work, the chapter is going to fail. It won't exist unless there are people to do the work. So I don't think there's any problem should be any problem for anybody if you make that a requirement.
Thank you, Bob. They say in politics, you should ask questions you know the answers to, and I totally agree with you. I wanted the context to be heard by all.
Okay.
I guess a question for John, would there be any staff implications for this change, and would that be manageable for you? You're muted.
I assume there would be some slight ones that I think can be managed pretty well, especially given how our database is continuing to expand and become a better system. So I'm not worried about that at all.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, I'll, I know Bob says we have a lot of options in front of us. I do think we should send it to membership, to the delegates with a recommendation. And my personal take is I support all of the bylaws changes as listed. Obviously, that's what this discussion is for. So I'm going to go to Lauren, to Rebecca, and then to Claire.
Okay, thanks, Matt. First of all, I'm a member of the Bylaws Committee. So I want everybody to be aware, like Bob said, we invited the chairs of the communities to come and talk to us. So what is proposed in here, I don't think, to use a term that's been used throughout this meeting, does not hurt the secret sauce. In fact, it supports it because there was alignment and agreement that this is what we need. I too support all of the amendments in here. And I just want to respectfully disagree with Bob on one thing, which is I believe that the governance structure that was developed for unaffiliated members is working. And the reason why we don't have a lot of delegates, I've said this from day one, go back and look at any meeting, anybody who's been at any delegate session that I've been at, the vast majority of our members aren't members because they're interested in governance of SPJ. They're interested in our mission, they're interested in the work the chapters, the communities, the committees do. And so that is working. And so with that said, I would move that we recommend full adoption of all bylaws changes to the delegates.
Is there a second? For purposes of discussion?
Second.
Okay. Now we can discuss. Rebecca.
Wait, who seconded? I didn't hear.
Bailing seconded it. Rebecca. You're muted, Rebecca.
Are we discussing what Lauren just moved, or?
We're discussing everything,
Okay.
but there is a motion on and a second on the floor.
Okay. First of all, Bob Becker, thank you and your committee for your work and your detail into the proposed changes. And there's a lot to absorb, a lot. My head is already mush. And I'm sure the people that are here, the 29 people, and hopefully other people, our members, will be aware that we're proposing this. These are big changes in the history of our organization. So, Mr. President, I move that we table the discussion of the amendment to the bylaws and wait till the new board is seated.
There's a motion on the floor.
I second.
Well, there's already a motion on the floor,
Oh.
so I think that takes priority. And I would also say that, again, this is not the board's ultimate decision, it's the delegates. And as a membership organization, I do think we should leave it up to the delegates to decide this. And I think it's appropriate to do that in September.
But I think that as the board members and the new ones that are coming in 2 months, the new board is going to have to, give us time to dig deep. I mean, as journalists, we dig deep. We do more research. We get input from members. This is going to affect them, not just us 8 and not just, the 29 that are here. We have a huge membership, and to decide to move it to the delegates. And another thing too, we're having a hybrid conference. Some delegates will be there in person, but what about the ones that can't make it? Is there equity there? Will they be able to have the voice that the people there in person? So I say we table it until next year when we can all gather together in DC and really talk it out. And at the same time, with the new board, because, if we were going to do changes, we should have done it in the beginning of your presidency, Matt, not at the tail end, or get things in before the new board.
But again, this has nothing to do with the board. It's a pass through. It goes to the delegates. It's the delegates.
I just think as board members, we need more time, especially for the ones that don't have all the history that Bob Becker has.
May I just say something?
One second, Bob, 1 second. I guess my guidance is this. If there's a motion on the floor to recommend this, if the board should vote on that, and if the board chooses not to recommend it, we should then take a second vote to pass it along to, then we can consider Rebecca's motion, which is to table it all together.
I just want to, in response to Rebecca, as a matter of how this organization has operated, bylaws amendments have always come to the board in April. Okay, and with this issue came to you in April, and you put it off until now because you had a very busy meeting in April. So as a practical matter, bylaws amendments don't happen at the beginning of a year. They happen mid to end of the year before the next convention. It's just the way it is. The timing is normal, quite frankly.
Well, again, times have changed. The pandemic came into play. And even though we have done things, and we've done a lot of things at SPJ that are changing, I think that, again, tabling it and being fair to the new board to discuss this at the same time, our membership.
I appreciate that. And I'm going to go down the list here, but I would just say this is for the delegates to decide. There will always be a new board. We cycle over every year. And so to me personally, this is a pass-through decision, and ultimately the real conversation will take place where and when it should with the delegates in September. And with that, I see Claire's hand and then Lauren again.
2 efficient questions. Number 1, do we present these bylaws changes as one unit? Is it sort of all or nothing? We have to vote on it as one big comprehensive.
Bob said we can vote individually and they will be presented to the delegates individually.
Okay, thank you. And the other is just a clarification. I'm curious how the bylaws committee went from 5 days to 6 weeks. How that timing, if you could,
actually,
hold on a second, Bob.
That was the elections task force.
Oh, okay. How, was there anybody considered somewhere in the middle, 3 weeks? It just seems like a very big change, and I was wondering what the reasoning was behind it. Thank you.
Actually, the outer limits was to say some members of the elections task force wanted to make it April 1st. Okay, and so the 6 weeks became a midpoint. But because the rationale, the discussion we had in, this is not the bylaws committee again, it's the task force, was April 1st is a long time before an election for people, especially in an industry where people end up changing jobs or having other issues, to say you got to announce 6 months in advance. But again, the feeling was that for the members to get to understand and know the candidates, it has to happen. There has to be more time than 5 days.
I agree with you on that. I'm just curious about the 6 weeks part. That's all. I agree with you.
Again, there was a proposal for 6 months and or whatever, it's 5 months, and we moved it back to 6 weeks. There, historically, before we had one member, one vote, there were nominations from the floor. And so when we put in one member, one vote, the mechanics of creating the electronic ballot made it necessary to eliminate nominations from the floor, and also to make it possible for the staff to create the ballots before they left Indy for wherever the convention would be, because they're too busy when they're in the convention city to mess with that. So, the 5 days before was a short backup from on the floor. But over time, what we've learned is having people, the candidates known, and other organizations we looked at asked that their nominations happen much earlier than ours. Other places, other organizations, some of them condensed their whole election into 2 months. And, they say, you announce by such and such a date, and 2 months later, we're going to have an election. So this was a middle ground for us.
And just to put a period on that too, we got that report from the task force in March, and that date was floating out there then. I think the idea was that 5 days is far too short, someone to announce. Then there's not a lot of time to, assess that candidate, or for that candidate to get their message out, or for the membership to meet the candidate. And 6 weeks provides that opportunity. Do you have other questions, Claire?
No, that was it. Thank you for
Okay.
clarifying.
Yeah, thanks for your questions. Lauren.
So I wanted to reiterate a point that Bob made. This was first in our packet in April, and the board chose to postpone it. And then it was in our last packet, and the board chose to postpone it. So we're at this deadline time because of the actions of this board. We've all had ample time to review what's in the packet. A question for you, Matt, in the interest of time, because I know we have awards that we need to review in executive session. Would you find it helpful for me to make a friendly amendment that we move this without any recommendations to the delegates?
If you'd like to make that, please do. I don't know if that would change the minds of people who seem like they don't want to have it move forward at all.
I guess I'm asking because instead of debating it change by change, which I know we will lose some people during that time period, we move the debate to the convention floor, which is where the ultimate vote happens anyway.
I guess under Robert's rules, you've proposed that, Bailing. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, I support that.
Okay.
Thanks, Bailing. So yeah, I'm doing that.
In the interest of time, because we lose people in 35 minutes, will the board, let's vote on that measure. And if you support moving it to the delegates without recommendation this year for their edification and vote
So
yes.
are you saying, excuse me, Matt, are you saying that whatever Bob has proposed, we're just going to move it to them? We have no say here. That's what you're saying?
Correct. The motion is to move the proposal to the delegates for their vote. If you do not support that, vote no. If you support that, vote yes.
Right. And so it's without a recommendation one way or another, because it's ultimately the delegates who decide and vote on all bylaws changes.
Any questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
No, I think we do it by, I think we do it by person here, please.
Okay, request for a roll call vote. Yvette, could you please call the roll?
Sure, I'll do the roll call vote. So Jerry, what do you vote?
I'm going to vote no.
Yvette Walker?
Yes.
Bailing?
Yes.
Claire?
No.
Rafael Mader is not present, so we don't go to that. Rebecca?
No.
Lauren?
Yes.
For myself, I vote no. And Matt?
I vote yes.
It's 1, 2, 3, 4.
You have a tie.
We have a tie.
We got a tie.
So it will not proceed. We do not need to make another motion. We can move on to the next subject.
So there will be no bylaws voted upon at convention, correct? So we don't really need a business session at convention for that.
No,
purpose.
just for a point of order, and I'm going to ask our parliamentarian this. There is one other method for getting any matter before the delegates, and that's to have 10 chapters request it 60 days in advance. Bob, what is that 60-day deadline?
The 60 days deadline is 4 or 5 days from now.
Just putting
The
that out
boards-
there for those who
the
are
boards-
interested
the
to know
boards of
that.
10 chapters, the boards of 10 chapters could vote to advance these amendments to the floor. But it would require board votes of the boards of those chapters, and it would have to happen at least 60 days before the opening business meeting. And so the opening business meeting is the 2nd of September. So it's whatever, the deadline is whatever 60
I
days.
calculated about July 1st, we'd need to get it out.
Right, yeah.
Which would be this Thursday.
Okay, just for everybody's awareness.
All right, thank you very much. Matt, what about my motion to table it?
Well, I
It's
just said
unnecessary.
there's no need for it. The motion was tabled by its failure to proceed.
Thank you.
So tabled meaning it will come back, or is this, we're just not accepting the report at all? And
No,
there's no action. It's as if it never happened.
Right, it's dead until theoretically next time.
Yeah.
May
Unless
not
anyone,
need many delegates this year.
unless anyone would like to reconsider, who voted no and move this to.
Can we move on, please?
Yeah.
Let's just move on.
Okay, John, let's talk about briefly the 2022 and 23 discussions. I really am nervous about losing a quorum. What's an important.
Yeah, so if we can leave it at with the 2022 convention to the fact that we are going to have all of our sessions live. We've just got confirmation from Katie that we can do that and that we will have them recorded. And I know that was the main sticking point for that year, for that convention, this year's convention, and we've got that sort of figured out at this point. So, and I can keep people updated by email, and like we have bi-weekly meetings with Matt and Rebecca. And so that's usually the way from this point forward. In a given year, we keep the board notified is through the leadership. And then if there's things that seem to need to be elevated higher to the board on its own, then we do it at that point. So otherwise, I'll keep giving weekly updates on attendance and sponsorship and all that kind of stuff. And that should hopefully keep everybody in the loop. So that's on that on 2022. I guess we can stop there, and then I can bring up the 2023 question as well.
Lauren and then Rebecca.
I'm just going to go backwards briefly for a minute, Matt, because I don't know if you saw the request from the chair of the awards committee in chat. That very small, narrow bylaws change they requested regarding, which award is it, Andy?
The fellows, right?
The fellows.
The fellows.
I don't know if this, because that is something that we discussed when we discussed the fellows, if this members of this board would be willing to vote on that one narrow change.
We're done with that discussion.
You also should think about whether you would vote on the change in the deadline for nominations, which is part of the policy you adopted at the last meeting.
I'm not sorry. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but we already moved on from that issue. Please.
We made a motion.
To be clear, I do think if the awards committee chair wants to raise an issue, he should be able to. And I will say that the bylaws disagree with the policy that we have. The policy gives fellows lifetime membership. The bylaws say that we waive dues. So it's a minor point. If there aren't enough votes to proceed, then there aren't enough votes to proceed.
I think we already took a vote on this whole bylaws issues, and to go back, I mean, then why did we vote before, Matt? So let's just stick to what we voted. We voted basically it's tabled, it's gone. And so let's move on to the meeting. Going back, is not a good thing in a board meeting. Thank you.
I agree. I think it defeats the purpose of even having voted. And we took time out for that.
Again, I was just saying I was respecting the comments of the awards chair.
Oh, no, I understand that 100%. But unfortunately, it falls under that same jurisdiction.
Okay.
But I
Thank you.
understand.
In the interest of time, let's Laura move on.
Thank you. Thank
you. Any questions on the convention or John on 23? Do you want to briefly get into that or should we?
Well,
Can I jump in real quick? John, first of all, I just wanted to relate to you and Katie and your staff that, when we brought it to your attention about the live capabilities from the convention, you addressed it immediately. And I appreciate it because I think that it really, I believe your staff and Katie and you are going to put together a very quality hybrid. And I hope it is a model that others can learn from, especially journalism organizations that will be looking at us because we will be the only hybrid. So thank you very much for addressing that issue and also for getting all the information on the website. That is very important right now. And I hope all our board members and all our members at this meeting right now will start spreading the word because we all have different followers and friends on our social media. Thank you very much. And also to Billy. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Lauren, do you have a hand up on this issue? No. Okay. Seeing no other questions on 21 or 22, John, did you want to say something briefly on 23?
Well, we
Very
probably,
briefly.
yeah, well, we can't wait too much longer to try to figure this stuff out, which is why we need to make sure when we're trying to follow the timing marks on the agenda when we can. But the 2023 convention at this point, if we were to continue on the pathway we wanted to, which was to partner with CMA and ACP, would make it a Monday through Wednesday convention because their contract with the Atlanta property is for those dates because long story, but that's how they ended up. They don't necessarily like it either, but it's sort of how it ended up because they had to bump it from 2020. So we need to probably get the board's guidance and direction at some point on if we continue to pursue that 2023 partnership with CMA and ACP, noting that it would change our traditional convention timeframe from a Thursday through Sunday to a Monday through Wednesday or Thursday. I mean, it could be Sunday through Wednesday, or we could try to work with that. Or do we do something entirely different with 2023, which could include looking at the Phoenix property we had considered or some other option? So we don't want to wait too much longer on that.
Do we delay your timetable by talking about this at our next meeting?
No, we wouldn't. I mean, I think we can make it work. I'll just let CMA and ACP know that they'll have to wait on us a little bit longer.
Yeah, I would prefer to do that given the times. I mean, my personal take is that a midweek convention is a non-starter. Journalists would find it increasingly difficult to travel there. That's what makes the weekend convention so appealing to so many. But I don't want to get into a board discussion when we have so little time for other elements to talk about today. So if it doesn't hurt you, let's talk about it next month. Thanks.
Okay.
There are committee and community reports on your agenda. There are some committee chairs here. I would respectfully ask those who want to make a verbal report to keep it to 60 seconds if you so wish.
I can do mine.
Okay.
The Diversity Committee, the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Thank you, Matt, for changing the name. We decided to go forward with the Diversity Leadership Program. And we're going to, right now we're taking applications. So if you know anybody that wants to come to our convention, it's going to be virtual for us. And we're going to have speakers for our fellows. You have to have more than 2 years experience to apply. And so we're in the progress of that. We also are still working on a new program called, it's called Diversity Explained. And it's just going to be a social media program. We wanted the Words That Matter, but Headquarters had gotten a little busy and we needed the graphics and they were going to help us. So that one's on pause, but there's another one in place. And that's my 60 seconds, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Yvette Walker, I see you had a hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to quickly talk about the Journalism Education Committee meeting. The report is not there, so I just want to point this out. The committee's been really busy this year working on several new projects and a few older established programs, such as Press for Education. It has been successful. Meredith Cummings is working on that, and she sent out over 150, probably closer to 200 emails to journalists who have signed up to check on their interest. There's been almost 300 in-person trainings and 7,000 YouTube views. We have the committee has, so anyway, that's still going and doing well. There was a conference proposal submitted by the committee, which was accepted. So there's a data journalism conference that will be done by members of the committee, and I'm pretty excited about that. We've been talking about a mentoring program where a pro newsroom would mentor a college newsroom. That's still on the table for discussion. We continue to tweak the list of our 700 U.S. minority serving institutions. It's a lot of work and a long list, but we're still working on that. We're also talking about education advocacy and we have agreed that we want to write releases commenting on important education issues of the day. And the website has been updated with the correct committee members, and that's it.
Thank you. See no other hands up. There is an awards report in there. Andy, speak now or hold your piece if you don't want to talk. And there's also a nominations committee in there that gives an update on the election. With that, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session. Thank you, Andy.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Oh, for
Motion
the
by
purposes
Lauren.
of discussing the awards.
Correct.
For the purposes as posted on our agenda.
Thank you.
On the agreement with ACP and CMA, which is also posted on the agenda.
Correct. Thank you.
I would request that you let us all know when you're coming out, please.
Yeah, we will send emails to all of those on this call. And Andy, I don't think we need you in executive session. Thanks for offering. Thanks for everyone for taking the time to be here today. With that, I will call the vote. All those in favor of moving into close?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, motion carries. And thanks again, y'all.
I have a question real quick. So, Lauren, you
Let's-
second?
Let's wait till people log off.
And the recording is paused.
West Coast. We are back in open session. Is there a motion?
Yes. I move to approve the memorandum of understanding between CMA, ACP, and SPJ to execute a 2020 convention in DC.
I second.
Friendly amendment? Did you say
2022,
2020 or did you
Yeah,
say 2022?
2022.
I said 2022.
Okay, awesome.
I second it.
Motion by Yvette, second by Rebecca. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carries unanimously without no votes or abstentions. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
Rebecca and Vei-Ling, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Carries
And
unanimously.
one more thing. Toast to Yvette Walker. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Can we
Yvette, thanks
sing
for
now?
taking the time. We'll sing you off.
No,
I'll go
she's
party.
recording first. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy
Thank you
birthday,
very
Yvette.
much.
Have a great rest of the day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See y'all. Take care.